It's a quiet Wednesday afternoon in Hudson, Ohio, a beautiful suburban town where large colonial houses sit on spacious lots and tree-lined streets give you that perfect American dream feeling, the kind of place where nothing bad ever seems to happen. But on April 19th, 2023, that peaceful image was about to be shattered forever. Mary was getting worried, really worried. Her ex-boyfriend Todd was supposed to pick up their 4-year-old daughter from school, but he never showed up. This wasn't like him at all. Todd was many things, but he was absolutely devoted to his kids. He would never just forget to pick up his daughter. When the school called to say their little girl was still waiting, Mary's heart sank. She rushed to get her daughter, but her mind was racing. Where was Todd? Why wasn't he answering his phone? That's when she made the call that would change everything.
If I'd be able to request a wellness check on someone.
Okay, what's going on?
My daughter was supposed to be picked up by her father today, and I got a call from the school that she was still at the school, so I ended up picking her up. They tried to contact him. I tried to call him a couple times and haven't received anything back.
And what's his name?
Todd Morgan.
Has he ever done anything like this?
No, I don't think he would forget his daughter from school, but we are going through some custody issues right now, which is why I find it to be a little bit more unusual.
When you call him, does it go straight to voicemail or does it ring?
It rings.
The dispatcher took down the information. Todd's address, 328 West Streetsboro Street. Officers would be there soon, but what they were about to find would turn this simple welfare check into one of the most shocking murder investigations Hudson had ever seen. At just before 7 p.m. that evening, officers Peggy and Bowen arrived at Todd's house. It was a nice neighborhood, the kind where you'd expect to find successful professionals living quiet, comfortable lives. They knocked on the front door. No answer. They called out. Still nothing. That's when they decided to check around back. What they found there will stay with them forever. Just inside the back door, lying on the floor in nothing but a dressing gown, was Todd Morgan. But this wasn't a natural death or even a suicide. The scene was disturbing and confusing.
I don't see a weapon. That's why I'm thinking something else.
As they carefully moved through the house, more questions started piling up. At the bottom of the stairs, they found another shell casing. In one of the children's bedrooms, a piggy bank was knocked over, coins scattered across the floor. But if this was a robbery, why wasn't the house completely torn apart? Why were expensive laptops and tablets still sitting out in plain view? Todd's fancy Porsche was still in the driveway. His wallet was still in the house, though it had no cash. But according to family, Todd rarely carried cash anyway. In the master bedroom, they found what looked like the aftermath of a party gone wrong. The bed was messy, bottles of alcohol were sitting out, and there were open condom packages scattered on the floor. This was getting stranger by the minute. The back door itself told another part of the story. It was damaged, as if someone had forced it open from the inside. A piece of the door frame was missing, and officers found it several feet away on the deck outside. But perhaps the most chilling discovery was the footprints. Bloody footprints leading from inside the house, across the deck, and down toward the driveway. Someone had walked through Todd's blood and left the scene. Officers quickly checked their own shoes and those of the paramedics. None of them matched. These prints belonged to the killer. It was clear now that Dr. Todd Morgan hadn't taken his own life. He'd been murdered. But who was Todd Morgan really? And what had led to this brutal end? At 41 years old, Todd seemed to have it all. He was incredibly smart. He'd earned his bachelor's degree from Cleveland University, then his master's, and finally his PhD from Kent State. He'd worked as a professor in Massachusetts and Michigan before returning to Cleveland State University just 2 years before his death. But Todd's greatest joy wasn't his career, it was his 2 children. Everyone who knew him described him as a devoted, loving father. He was the dad who played video games with his kids, had dance-offs in the living room, and took them on amazing trips. His 4-year-old daughter absolutely adored him. On the day he died, she waited patiently at school, certain he would come to get her like he always did. When her mom showed up instead, the little girl was confused and wanted to call Daddy, but Daddy would never answer the phone again. However, Todd's personal life was complicated. His first marriage had ended after he had an affair with one of his students. That relationship eventually ended too, and Todd was struggling with alcohol. He was required to take breathalyzer tests that were monitored through an app, updating his ex on the results throughout the week. His last test was the day before he died. He passed. As detectives started piecing together Todd's final hours, they began interviewing neighbors. What they learned would blow the case wide open. Eugene and Sherry, a married couple who lived nearby, had heard what sounded like gunshots around 7:20 that morning. At the time, they thought it might be a car backfiring or construction noise. Todd had been renovating his house for over a year, so loud sounds weren't unusual. But then Sherry saw something that made her blood run cold. She watched as someone with long hair, small frame, came out of Todd's house and went to a car she'd never seen before, a light-colored vehicle parked next to Todd's Porsche. This person grabbed something from the car, took it back into the house, then came back out and drove away. They weren't running, Sherry told police, but walking fast, quick-paced. Eugene had been watching too. He saw the same car, which he described as light blue or gray. A smaller car, definitely not one of the regular vehicles they'd seen at Todd's house. This was huge. The neighbors had potentially witnessed the killer leaving the scene. But the real breakthrough came from something completely unexpected. At exactly 7:21 a.m. on April 19th, just 1 minute after the neighbors heard the gunshots, a 911 call was placed from a cell phone at Todd's address. When Hudson dispatch answered, no one was on the other end of the line. This type of call wasn't unusual. iPhones will automatically call 911 if the power button is pressed 5 times quickly. It usually happens by accident, like when a phone gets jostled in a car cup holder. But in this case, that accidental call was about to solve a murder. When investigators traced the phone number, it led them to a name: Tariana Siobhan Denise Pichelle, a woman from Akron with a slim build, long dark hair, and, get this, she drove a silver crossover vehicle. Suddenly, everything clicked. Tariana matched the description the neighbors had given. Her phone had accidentally called 911 from Todd's house at the exact time of the murder. This wasn't a coincidence. But who was Tariana Pichelle? And what was her connection to Todd Morgan? When officers went to find her, they discovered she didn't live at the address registered to her phone. The homeowner refused to let them search the house and claimed she was staying with friends. While they couldn't find Tariana that night, investigators were busy pulling her phone records. What they found was incredible. Just 6 minutes after that accidental 911 call, Tariana's phone was traveling at 60 miles per hour near Interstate 271. And here's the kicker. Todd's missing cell phone was following the exact same route. Then suddenly, Todd's phone stopped moving along the highway. It was never found despite multiple searches. When investigators dug deeper into that shell casing found at the scene, they made a shocking discovery. The casing matched a gun that had been used in an unsolved murder case from Cleveland in 2021. In that case, the main suspect had been, you guessed it, Tariana Pichelle. She was the ex-girlfriend of that victim and the registered owner of the murder weapon. She'd been questioned about that case just days before Todd's murder. Despite strong suspicions, there hadn't been enough evidence to charge her in the 2021 case. But this time would be different. Investigators found Tariana at her sister's apartment complex. Her silver Ford Taurus was in the parking lot, missing its back license plate. They brought her in for questioning. By now, the evidence against her was overwhelming. Her phone data placed her at Todd's house at the time of the murder. Ring camera footage showed a vehicle matching her car parked by Todd's back door. Investigators determined that the bloody shoe prints on the deck matched a specific type of Nike sneaker, and they found Facebook photos of Tariana wearing those exact shoes just months before. Her DNA was found inside Todd's house on a cigar and on those condom packages scattered in the bedroom. But perhaps most damning of all, after the murder, Tariana had switched phones and phone numbers. Investigators traced these changes and continued monitoring her activity. On April 22nd, just 3 days after the murder, she searched online for, "Can police track my phone even if I remove the SIM?" She then accessed multiple articles about Todd Morgan, including one titled, "Hudson Murder Victim Identified as Cleveland State University Professor." Over the following weeks, she searched for her own name in connection to the crime 41 times. She was obsessed with following the investigation into her own crime. When detectives finally sat down with Tariana for questioning, she denied everything. She claimed she didn't know Todd Morgan and had never been to Hudson. But the evidence told a different story. Investigators discovered that Tariana and Todd had connected on Bumble, a dating app. Their conversation had then moved to text messages. But this wasn't a typical romance. Tariana's messaging history revealed that she was involved in prostitution. She advertised that she only does outcalls, meaning she would travel to clients' locations. Her messages included price lists for potential customers. On the morning he was killed, Todd had sent Tariana a $50 payment through Cash App. But there was something else. A second payment of $1,000 that he'd attempted to send 23 minutes later. This larger payment never went through. It required additional authentication, and Todd never completed the verification. Why? Because he was already dead. The timeline was becoming crystal clear. Todd had contacted Tariana for services. She'd driven to his house in Hudson, likely arriving sometime overnight or in the early morning hours. The neighbors had seen her car there when they woke up at 5 a.m. Something went wrong. Maybe Todd couldn't pay the full amount. Maybe there was an argument. Maybe Tariana decided to rob him, or maybe she planned this all along. What's certain is that at approximately 7:20 a.m., Tariana shot Todd Morgan 7 times with a 9mm handgun. The medical examiner determined that 1 shot was fired at close range, and 2 shots to his chest area would have been fatal within minutes. After the shooting, Tariana's phone accidentally called 911 as she was trying to leave. She grabbed something from her car, possibly to clean up evidence, then fled the scene with Todd's cell phone. She drove toward the interstate, disposing of Todd's phone somewhere along the way where it was never recovered. When confronted with all this evidence during her interrogation, Tariana continued to deny involvement. Even when shown her own phone searches, her DNA evidence, and the timeline placing her at the scene, she insisted she didn't know what detectives were talking about. "I really want to know what you want to say," the detective told her. "I want to know what happened." But Tariana had no explanation for any of it. Initially, she pleaded not guilty and prepared to fight the charges in court. But on the day her trial was supposed to begin, reality set in. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no way to explain away the phone data, the DNA, the shoe prints, the witness testimony, and her own online searches about the case. She agreed to a plea deal, guilty to aggravated murder in exchange for 20 years to life in prison, plus an additional 3 years on a gun charge. She would be eligible for parole after 23 years, but there was no guarantee she would ever be released. At her sentencing hearing in September 2024, Todd's family finally had their chance to speak. Mary, the mother of Todd's daughter, told the court how the murder had destroyed their little girl's world. She was only 4 when she waited at school for her dad to pick her up, not understanding why he never came, Mary said through tears. "I had to explain to her that her daddy wouldn't be coming back because someone had hurt him. I watched her curl up in my arms, hiding her face as she processed this unimaginable loss." Todd's mother, Sandy, revealed that her son had been struggling in the weeks before his death. He told her he was broken, but was trying to better himself through exercise, meditation, and staying healthy. He'd found faith and told his mother that he knew his salvation was with God. But he'd also experienced a recent setback, one that indirectly led to his encounter with Tariana and ultimately to his death. "Todd's not here to tell his story," Sandy told the court, looking directly at Tariana. "Only God, Todd, and you know the truth of what happened on April 19th. All I know is he was brutally murdered by you, and he basically died for nothing. You didn't even know him." When given the chance to speak, Tariana offered only a brief statement. "Yes, to his family, I'm very sorry, and I hope that one day you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." The judge sentenced her to exactly what had been agreed upon in the plea deal. She would serve a minimum of 23 years before being eligible for parole, but could potentially spend the rest of her life in prison. As Tariana was led away in shackles, family members called out, "I love you," presumably her own family, still supporting her despite the horrible crime she'd committed. This case shows us how quickly a life can be destroyed by bad choices and dangerous encounters. Todd Morgan was a flawed man who was struggling with personal demons, but he was also a devoted father who was trying to get his life back on track. One poor decision to seek companionship through dangerous channels cost him everything. It left 2 children without their father, families shattered by grief, and a community struggling to understand how such violence could happen in their peaceful neighborhood. Tariana Pacelli, meanwhile, was already suspected in one unsolved murder when she killed Todd. If she'd been caught and convicted for that first crime, Todd might still be alive today. The case was solved by a combination of old-fashioned detective work and modern technology. Without that accidental 911 call, investigators might never have identified Tariana as a suspect. Without cell phone data, they couldn't have placed her at the scene. Without DNA evidence and digital footprints, they might not have been able to prove their case. But perhaps the most important evidence came from ordinary people, the neighbors who paid attention to what was happening around them and were willing to speak up when something seemed wrong. Eugene and Sherry's testimony about the mystery car and the person they saw leaving Todd's house was crucial in building the case against Tariana. Their Ring doorbell camera footage provided visual confirmation of what they'd witnessed. This tragic story reminds us that danger can come from the most unexpected places. Todd thought he was arranging a private encounter with someone he'd met online. Instead, he encountered a killer who had already taken one life and was apparently willing to take another. For Todd's children, the impact of this crime will last forever. His daughter, now 7 years old, is growing up without the father who adored her. His son has lost the dad who played video games with him and took him on adventures. The ripple effects of one violent act continue to spread through the lives of everyone who loved Todd Morgan. And somewhere in an Ohio prison, Terriana Pacelli begins what could be a life sentence, knowing that her choices on that April morning destroyed multiple families, including her own. This case serves as a stark reminder that our actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are irreversible. Todd Morgan's story ended tragically, but perhaps by sharing it, we can help others understand the very real dangers that exist in our connected world. The investigation that began with a worried mother's phone call to police ultimately revealed a web of deception, violence, and tragedy that no one could have predicted. It's a case that will be remembered in Hudson, Ohio for years to come, not just for its shocking nature, but for the innocent lives it destroyed along the way.